Dolly Parton is far more than the queen of country music. She is a living testament to resilience, tenderness, and unwavering truth. She gave the world, "I Will Always Love You," a goodbye so honest and heartbreaking that it became one of the greatest love ballads of all time. Yet behind that flawless, soaring voice lives a woman who has carried a lifetime of heartbreak that audiences rarely ever saw. For more than 60 years, she has worn grief like a second skin, transforming silence into songs that healed millions. She didn't just rise out of poverty. She rose out of ashes that most people couldn't even name. Now, at 79 years old, when most would step away to rest, Dolly continues to face storms with a quiet strength and a fire that refuses to fade. And what she's still enduring today may be the most powerful and perhaps the most devastating chapter of her life. If Dolly's music has ever comforted you, pause for a moment and honor the woman who has given her heart in every lyric and has never stopped giving. Some people enter the world carrying wounds so deep that even childhood innocence cannot protect them. Dolly Rebecca Parton was one of those souls. She was born on January 19, 1946 in Sevier County, Tennessee, in a tiny one-room cabin tucked deep in the Great Smoky Mountains. That cabin had no electricity, no running water, and certainly no promises. Her family was so poor that the doctor who delivered her was paid not with money, but with a sack of cornmeal. Dolly would later recall that night her mother laboring under a thin quilt while cold mountain air pressed through the cracks of the cabin walls, the wind rattling the boards outside as hope became the only warmth inside. The Partons were not just poor, they were bone-deep poor, the kind of poverty that imprints itself for a lifetime. Winters were brutal in the Smokies. Dolly remembered waking in the middle of the night when icy drafts cut through the wall so sharply that it took her breath away. She and her 11 siblings would huddle together beneath a single blanket, their bodies their only source of heat. Years later, with a small, wistful smile, she told an interviewer, "That was the only warm thing we knew." Her childhood was marked by hardships most children could never imagine. Summers meant washing in the river. Winters meant standing over pans of freezing water that stung her skin. Nights carried the smell of damp wood, and the lullabies she heard were not sung but made by the buzzing of insects and the scratching of mice in the walls. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, though unable to read or write, was the wisest man she ever knew. He rose before the sun and worked until his hands were raw, hauling gravel, planting tobacco, taking any labor he could find to make sure that 13 plates had food. Her mother, Avie Lee, by the age of 35, had already given birth to all 12 of her children. She cooked, cleaned, sewed clothes, and told stories long after her voice had gone hoarser, weaving fairy tales as a shield against the sharp edges of reality. By age 6, Dolly was already taking on the role of a second mother, fetching buckets of water from the creek, rocking babies in her arms, and stirring beans on the wood stove. Toys and games didn't exist for her. The chores became her pastimes, and survival was everyone's responsibility. Then, in 1955, when Dolly was just 9 years old, grief swept through the Parton household in a way she had never known. Her baby brother Larry lived for only 4 days. There was no funeral, no headstone, just an unmarked patch of earth behind their home. The silence in the house was suffocating. Dolly's mother sat for hours, staring into nothing, her grief heavy and wordless. Her father buried himself in endless work as though sweat could drown sorrow. Dolly carried that loss quietly all her life, admitting later that certain songs she wrote were ways of speaking to the brothers she barely had the chance to know. School offered little comfort. One winter, her mother lovingly sewed her a coat from scraps of leftover fabric. Each piece was stitched with devotion and hope that Dolly would wear it proudly. But when she arrived at school, her classmates laughed and mocked her. To them, it was just rags. Dolly walked with her chin high, holding back tears she refused to let them see. Years later, she would transform that humiliation into one of her most cherished songs, "Coat of Many Colors." Released in 1971, what had once been pain became a testament to pride and resilience. Dolly later admitted she still struggled to sing it after her mother's passing in 2003 because every line was tied to love and loss. Music became her lifeline. By age 7, Dolly was writing songs long before she could even spell properly. She turned hunger into melody, grief into lyrics, and sang to fill the void left by her brother's death. "I didn't write to be famous," she would say decades later. "I wrote to survive. Every cruel winter, every whispered goodbye, every lonely walk to school in a coat of scraps became part of the voice that would one day carry her from the hills of Tennessee to the grandest stages in the world." By the time Dolly was 10, her voice was already turning heads. In 1956, she began traveling with her uncle Bill Owens to small radio stations and makeshift studios. They carried little more than sandwiches and songs. Some nights they slept on couches in borrowed spaces or even in the backseat of cars parked on empty streets. Dolly would later describe those years as a childhood rich in dreams but poor in everything else. When she graduated from Sevier County High School in 1964, she wasted no time chasing her dream. The very next morning, she boarded a Greyhound bus bound for Nashville with nothing but a cardboard suitcase, $20 in her pocket, and a vow to herself that she would not return home empty. But Nashville was not welcoming. Its neon glow could be dazzling one moment and cruel the next. She quickly realized that talent wasn't enough. Doors shut quickly, often before she had the chance to speak. Nights ended in cheap rented rooms, where she could reach the sink from her bed, staring at the rain sliding down the windows, wondering if anyone in that city would ever believe in her the way she believed in herself. Her first recording deal with Monument Records in 1965 was supposed to be the break she needed. Instead, it became a trap. Executives decided her voice wasn't right for country music and pushed her into singing bubblegum pop songs. She recorded tracks like Happy Happy Birthday Baby and What Do You Think About Loving, but her heart wasn't in them. She later confessed that those sessions made her feel like she was wearing someone else's skin. The singles failed, and Nashville dismissed her as just another small-town girl who didn't belong. But Dolly's spirit was not one to be broken. She worked during the day singing in small clubs for tips, barely enough to cover rent, and spent her nights scribbling lyrics by candlelight when the electricity was cut. Her perseverance paid off in 1966 when the song she co-wrote with her uncle, Bill Put It Off Until Tomorrow, became a hit for singer Bill Phillips. Suddenly, industry insiders were asking, who's Dolly Parton? The following year in 1967, she released her debut album, Hello, I'm Dolly. The title wasn't just an introduction, it was a declaration. Her songs weren't light pop confections. They were raw and real, carved from hunger, heartbreak, and survival. Yet even then, the industry underestimated her, treating her as a novelty or a backup singer. But what they failed to see was that behind her sequined gowns was steel, and behind her sweet smile was a songwriter who refused to let anyone else define her story. By 1973, she proved it beyond doubt. She wrote and recorded I Will Always Love You, a farewell so pure and devastating it would echo across decades and genres. That one song ensured Dolly would never again be dismissed or overlooked. She was no longer just a singer. She was a force who changed the face of country music forever.